Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The next one is a pro-revenge story. A few years back, I landed my first gig after college at a local TV station. The owner, Rick, was hands down the greasiest, most unscrupulous dude I've ever met. Despite rolling in dough, he'd lie and scheme to avoid paying his dues. This was around the time the station signed a deal with Satellite Vision to broadcast regionally. Being a small-time operation, we had 2 months max to upgrade our systems for the wider Satellite Vision coverage area. Miss the deadline, and Rick would face hefty fines per the contract terms. Clueless about the tech side, Rick brought on my buddy Jake as a freelance consultant. Jake quoted $20K to automate the whole process, but greedy Rick balked at the price. Instead, he made Jake find a cheaper workaround, fronting all equipment costs to be reimbursed later, at roughly half Jake's original quote. I warned Jake that slimy Rick would screw him over, but Jake just smirked. Watch this. Sure enough, Jake pulled it off, and we went live on Satellite Vision, right on schedule. Rick was over the moon, until Jake presented the bill. Then, the usual runarounds began. Funds are tight this month. Let me pay you later. And so on. That's when Jake whipped out his trump card. Not only could he pull the plug, taking us off the air entirely, but he revealed the catch. To keep our uplink running on a shoestring, someone had to manually code the broadcast daily, a simple 5-minute routine, but Jake was the only one at the station who knew how. Jake laid down the ultimatum. Either Rick pays the outstanding balance plus a $2,500 monthly consulting fee, or we go dark while racking up Satellite Vision penalties. Cornered, that weasel Rick coughed up the cash pronto. Instead of the original $20K, Jake milked over double that amount with his nifty $2,500 monthly gig for nearly a year before teaching someone else the routine. Out of pity, he said. The moral: short-term greed will always leave you worse off down the line. Hey, I'd advise finding an investor next time instead of jerking around your contractors, Rick, Jake quipped on his way out. Rick's face was redder than a tomato. The first one is an entitled people story. I'm a 72-year-old farmer who has lived on my family's land for my entire life. My daddy left me this 300-acre farm when he passed, and it's been my whole world ever since. I grow corn, raise chickens, and have a nice little herd of cows that provide milk and meat. Farming is in my blood, and I take pride in carrying on the family legacy. There's nothing I love more than being out in the fields at sunrise, getting my hands dirty tending to the land. The fresh air, the warm sun on my skin, the smell of the earth, it nourishes my soul. My property is a fair piece away from town, with just a handful of neighbors scattered about. We're a tight-knit bunch who look out for each other. My wife Edna passed a few years back, so it's just me and my hound dog Rufus rattling around the old farmhouse these days. Well, things were going just fine until a city slicker named Karen moved into the fancy new housing development they built across the highway. She joined up with some other newcomers and decided they were going to start a homeowners association, or homeowner association as they call it, to improve property values. Now I want to make something real clear. I have never been part of this homeowner association nonsense. My land is grandfathered in and doesn't have a thing to do with that new development, but that Karen and her cronies seem to think they're fancy. Bylaws apply to my family's farm too. It started off with some minor annoyances. They would drive by and scowl at my cow pasture, saying the animals made too much noise and smell. They sent me letters about my unsightly fence and demanded I paint it white to match the other properties. I just tossed those letters right in the trash where they belonged. But then things got more serious when they started messing with my livelihood. They accused me of not following proper landscaping practices and threatened to issue fines. They even claimed my tractors were too loud and tried to restrict when I could work my own fields. The straw that broke this camel's back came when I found a legal notice taped to my gate. Those snake-belly homeowner association lawyers were suing me for devaluing properties by not adhering to their covenants. I was facing tens of thousands of dollars in fines and court costs, and they had the audacity to demand I stop farming until this was settled. Trying to tell a man he can't work the land his family has owned for generations? That just didn't sit right with me at all. Now, I'm an easygoing fellow, but I was fixin' to get plain ornery about this whole crooked situation. So I decided it was time to lawyer up and show Karen and her highfalutin homeowner association they can't bully my family. I walked right into the best law office in town and told them my tale of woe. The attorneys there were appalled by the way I'd been treated. They agreed to take on my case free of charge as long as I let them turn it into a class action lawsuit against that godforsaken homeowner association. It felt good walking into that courtroom, knowing I had real legal eagles on my side. As the judge started hearing our testimony about the homeowner association's corruption and harassment, you could see Karen shrinking into her seat. Her lawyers tried every trick in the book, but our evidence was ironclad. Thanks to my case, dozens of other neighbors came forward. Turns out Karen's homeowner association had been illegally threatening folks all over the county. They'd even seized some poor widow's property by manipulating legal documents. When the verdict came back, let's just say it was mighty satisfying. Not only did I win my case hands down, but the judge fully dismantled that crooked homeowner association for good. Karen was removed from the board in disgrace. And sweeter yet, she had to pay me for all the anguish she'd caused. With the money she owed me, I bought myself a brand new John Deere tractor and hired some help so I can work less and spend more time relaxing on the porch. As for Karen and her highfalutin friends, most couldn't bear living here after being shamed and stripped of their power. One by one, those city slickers packed up and headed back from whence they came. So now things are back to normal here in my little slice of heaven. My farm is thriving, I've got money in my pocket, and best of all, not a single homeowner association letter in sight. This old man may be 72, but I've still got enough fight in me to stand up for what's right, and I'm proud I was able to protect this beautiful farm from those looking to ruin our way of life. Rufus seems happy, too, now that those homeowner association folks won't be around to harass his livestock. I reckon he's ready to spend his golden years in peace, and so am I. The next one is a petty revenge story. I'm a new dad. I'm sleep-deprived and just feel sluggish all the time. After dropping my baby off with her grandparents, I saw an invoice in my email for $450 that I never paid to Norton Antivirus. It had a phone number to call, so I called it. As soon as I called, I realized it was a scam, but it sure as heck aggravated me. I pretended to be scammed up until the point where I'd give my computer control to the scammers, which took a good 10 minutes. I spoke to Melvin. After that, I told him he's a dumb scammer and he yelled at me. So, I realized the number was still there. I have 2 Google Voice accounts I don't use anymore that I had for a prior job, so I called them. I kept calling. I kept asking for Melvin. Sometimes I'd get a new guy who didn't know my game. Fortunately, I didn't have anything urgent at work that day, so I kept calling. I called and called and called. At some point, one of the gentlemen let out an exasperated sigh, saying, "Oh my God, it's you again." I didn't relent. I kept calling. I called over and over and over and over again. I told as many of them as possible that their mothers are ashamed of them. I told them that their lives are wastes. I kept calling and calling until I actually had work to do, and so I stopped. Today, I woke up and called the number. Today, they were PayPal. I got Melvin again. We chatted before he told me to screw off. I called again. I kept calling non-stop for about 30 minutes. After an hour break, I tried calling again, immediately blocked on all my numbers. I grabbed a family member's phone, immediately disconnected. I win. It was a small, insignificant battle, but I won. No one can call that number anymore. Until next time. The next one is a malicious compliance story. My employer was a medium-sized business, approximately 50 employees at the time, and I happened to live right across the street, about 3-4 miles, from our office. Shortly after I started working there, they asked me if I would mind being listed as a contact for the burglar alarm, since all of the facility's administration people lived pretty far away, and I was right across the street. They said anytime the burglar alarm goes off, someone has to drive over to meet the police. Don't ask me why, I don't really understand the policy. At the time, I was a young, naive, recent college grad and figured I would try to be helpful and told them I didn't mind. Our internal company policy was, if you accidentally set the alarm off, you immediately call the people on the alarm company's list in order, so they know it's a false alarm and they can tell the alarm company to ignore it. At the outset, this worked pretty well. I'd get a few false alarm calls a year, but I'd always get an apologetic call from the employee that set the alarm off, so I would just tell the alarm company to ignore it. Then the company started growing, and we started having more and more false alarms as we had new employees who would forget about the alarm, and then we started having employees who would ignore the policy and would just leave after setting the alarm off without notifying anybody. After I got wise to this, I started telling the alarm company to ignore everything even if I didn't get a call because we started getting charged false alarm fees, and I figured there was a 99% chance it was a false alarm. I figured we shouldn't waste the time of the police or waste company money paying false alarm fees. I brought this up in a meeting with our chief operating officer, and they were shocked and insisted that we couldn't ignore alarm events because what if someone really did break in and somebody was working late? They could be at risk, so I said, okay, staff need refresher training because they aren't following the policy to notify me of false alarms, so we're going to have a ton of police dispatches for false alarm events. Chief Operating Officer minimized the issue and insisted the current policy was fine and no retraining was necessary. So cue malicious compliance. Anytime I got an alarm call without someone notifying me of a false alarm, I followed the policy and had them send the police. There were 2 or 3 false alarm calls where the police showed up, found nothing, and sent us a bill. The very next call, I sent the police like the policy said, and right as they were pulling up, they saw a vehicle pulling out of the parking lot and chased it. The employee that got chased? Yeah, it was the CEO. In addition to getting chased, he ended up getting cited for speeding as well. The next day, Chief Operating Officer tries to pin this on me like it's somehow my fault, to which I reply, I just followed the policy you gave me. The next day, the entire company went through refresher training on alarm procedures, and I was taken off the alarm call list. I count it as a win. The next one is an entitled people story. I, 23 years old female, work the night shift as a CNA in a nursing home. I don't know why the other CNA I worked with last night felt the need to target me, as it was my first time ever working with her. She's been there for only a couple of weeks. But she very obviously singled me out looking for a problem. I am a hard worker and have zero interest in any kind of drama. I come to work to take care of my patients and get paid, then I leave. I may be overly bothered by this because I have anger problems that I work hard on keeping in control due to past trauma, and I know that I have to keep it together to be successful for my dream career, so I just need to vent. This lady comes in a few minutes after me, and I don't recognize her, so I go out of my way to be helpful and ask her if she's familiar with the patients she's assigned to, and then give her a rundown of the patients and their needs, and let her know where I'll be if she needs help. After I finish checking on all my people I'm assigned to take care of for the night, I sit down and start taking notes for a class I'm taking, and she comes up and asks for help repositioning a patient in bed that can't move on her own, so I drop what I'm doing and go to help her. To reposition a patient, you first use the bed remote to lift the bed up to above your waist so that you don't hurt your back bending over, and then you get someone on each side of the bed to lift them up and turn them and such. We get to the ladies' room and I grab the bed remote and start lifting it up, but it pauses for a second because of a shortage in the wires. Cheap facility. So it takes me a little more than 2 seconds to reposition it to start lifting the bed some more, and the other CNA raises her voice at me while bobbing her head around with an attitude that the bed needs to be way higher than that. And I explained to her that I was trying to lift the bed up, but it paused for a second, and that I know how to do it. She then goes off on me about what I am and am not allowed to say to her, and acting so aggressive over nothing that even the patient and her roommate are looking at her confused and concerned. I didn't want to feed into her obvious attempts to make a scene, so I shrug it off and finish helping her with repositioning the lady, then turn around and walk out of the room and go back to the nurse's station. Moments later, I get up to answer a call light. Then when I am walking back to the nurse's station, the other CNA is standing there. And before I make it back to my seat, she starts yelling at me about how she is 47 years old and a 20-year-old vet, and that I better watch my mouth, and goes on and brings up my age several times, and how she even has kids older than me, and was saying stuff like, "I don't know what your problem is, you will respect me. I literally did not disrespect this woman once, and even went out of my way to be nice to her," and blah blah blah. And the whole time I kept repeating that I'm not going to argue with her. I'm just here to do my job, and I don't care about her age or her work experience. I told her, just stop, I'm not arguing with you, multiple times, but eventually just walked away because I felt myself starting to shake and my heart start to race, and I didn't want to go off and regret it later. Like I said, I have anger issues, so I get out of sight and lock myself in a bathroom, shaking, trying to catch my breath, while my heart is racing and pounding. I was nearly in tears because this woman was almost in my face about something stupid, and I couldn't blow up about it, and I wanted to so bad. I get myself together, and once I stop shaking, I walk out to the nurse's station, up to the nurse who witnessed it all, and told her what happened in the patient's room. Meanwhile, I can hear the other CNA talking loud to the other nurse, on all the way down the other hall, about how, "I didn't even do anything to that little white girl. All I did was ask for help with Mrs. Patient's name, and she gave me attitude about how she knows what she's doing, like I haven't been doing this for 20 years, blah blah blah," even though I had actually dropped what I was doing to help her with zero complaints. Then for the rest of the shift, she was staring me down and gossiping with the other nurse, but would get quiet and try to listen to what I would say to my nurse, even though it was all work-related. I'm thinking about asking the Don, pretty much like a supervisor to nursing staff, to watch the camera at the nurse's station so they can see how she jumped down my throat when I was minding my own business, but I don't want to cause more problems. I probably sound ridiculous for getting so worked up over someone acting like a child, but it really had me struggling to hold back. The next one is an entitled Parents Story. Today I had a late appointment with the midwife and couldn't seem to get an Uber, was waiting for almost 20 minutes for a driver, so decided to get the bus, but nice to know that was a mistake. Getting on the bus was normal, and I sat at the front of the bus in a single seat next to the window, still panicking about being late for my appointment. That was until the next stop, where a mother got on with an older kid and a younger kid. The older kid got on just fine and went to find a seat, but as the bus started moving, someone tapped my shoulder, and I looked down to see the younger kid. YK. "Can I sit here?" Me. "Sorry, bud. It's a bit difficult for me to move right now." YK. "Why?" Me. "Because of my big belly." I point at my stomach. "I got a baby." YK. "There's a baby hiding in your belly?" Me. "Yes, but he'll be here next month." YK. "Oh, okay, thanks." He walks over to his mother, who sat in a double seat. I sighed and looked out the window and began to text my friends, then remembered I needed to call the doctors, that I was going to be late. Pregnancy brain. But as I was pulling up the doctor's number, the mother began to talk to the person behind her loudly about rude and lazy teens, and how no one likes to be kind to kids nowadays. Now, I'm not very comfortable with confrontation. However, with all my bundled pregnancy hormones, I've been a lot better at speaking up for myself. So I sighed and turned to her as she glared at me and loudly began. So, are you going to let my kid sit down yet? Me. There are plenty of seats on the bus. I'm sure he can sit wherever, but I can't exactly move right now, especially while the bus is moving. See what I mean? Turns to the poor guy behind her again. Lazy teens. Me? I'm not lazy, just heavily pregnant. You're not pregnant, you just look fat to me. I was in a large hoodie, but even with that, you could tell I had a lovely belly sticking out in an impressive way. Honestly, in some tops, I look ridiculous. Me. I am pregnant. I'm also due next month, so I can't afford any accidents so late into my pregnancy. At this point, pointed at me in disgust. Kids your age shouldn't be getting pregnant. That's disgusting. Me. Not that you need to know, but I'm 24. How is that disgusting? EM. There's no way you're 24. You're way too small. Stop lying. Yes, I'm pretty short for my age. 5'14" for anyone wanting to know. At this point, I just ignored her and called up the doctor with her complaining loudly in the background. Nothing exciting like her being kicked off the bus or anything. The bus drivers tend to keep to themselves unless a fight breaks out physically. But yeah, I spent years reading about these people but never actually seen in person, so this was a new one for me. However, the looks aren't something I'm not used to. I get a lot of the older generation glaring at me since I've gotten bigger in my pregnancy. Now, I don't think I look young, but my sister tells me I do. And that being paired with my height probably isn't helping my case. The next one is an entitled parent's story. This might be a small thing, but it still made me so frustrated I, 39F, actually cried. There is a history of him not respecting my time and prioritizing social events with his crew of varyingly questionable buddies, instead of time with me and my brother. Dad and his SO were coming for coffee and a bite to eat Saturday at 1200. Instead of arriving more or less on time like a normal human, he rolled up almost an entire hour before at 11:10. He rang the doorbell once. I was out of earshot in the basement, as was my husband. He was in the shower, and we were not expecting people for 50 damn minutes. Dad did not call or indicate that he had been at our place at all. They proceeded to leave and go shopping. At 12, they rang us up from the shops. Instead of coming back to our house at the actual time of our social call, they tried to call me up to see if we were awake yet. At that exact moment, our plumber, a friendly neighbor, had dropped by to discuss our small bathroom reno. Friendly plumber was in for 15 minutes. I rang up my dad immediately after FP left. As I expected, Dad was just letting us know he was a little delayed. Instead, he had turned back. He was 15 minutes into his hour drive back home and didn't want to turn the car around to have coffee lunch because he had food in the car and had other things to do that day. It was 12:15 and he was supposed to be at our house 1200. A catastrophic delay, certainly. Meanwhile, my husband had baked bread and I had prepared the house for guests in the middle of a renovation. I just feel disrespected, discarded, and right at the bottom of his list of priorities. And insulted. Instead of, sorry we were early, it's, you should turn your doorbell volume up, and we assumed you were sleeping. Instead of delaying his schedule by 30 mins so he could drive back and have the coffee lunch we had prepared, it's, I have other things to do today. Please tell me I'm not the crazy one.
The story is titled, Entitled Mom Steals OOP's iPad and Demands to Let Her Kid Keep It. Hello y'all, long-time lurker, first-time poster. My boyfriend's power's out, so I have no one else to vent to, so please listen to my tale of woe. I work at a car dealership as a receptionist, one of my duties being greeting customers when they enter. I'm a professional artist on the side, and I've been busy with some commissions lately, so since it's not busy at the dealer, I started working on my iPad mini. It's old, and I'm working on upgrading, but I currently can't afford to, so I live with it despite the battery life being really short and I have to basically keep it plugged in at all times. During my lunch, I was in the waiting area doing more work when a kid, a little girl no older than 4, came up and watched me work. This happens a lot when I draw in public, and usually the kids just ask a lot of questions. But this NG, nice girl, was very quiet and just had a look of amazement, so I just let her be. Her mother, the EM in the story, was nearby at a salesman's desk working on purchasing a new car, which is a long and no doubt boring process. The salesman working with her walked away, which at my dealership they do very often to retrieve paperwork, talk to the sales/finance managers, etc. She looks over to me and her kid and asks her, "What are you looking at?" Her kid points at my screen and says, "She's painting puppies." I was working on Twitch emotes of a streamer's dog. I sort of show my screen to EM, and she then asks her kid if she wants to draw, which the girl excitedly said yes. I expected EM to pull out a paper and pencils, or at least ask me if I can get some for her too, but she just looked at me expectantly. When I realized she was waiting for me to hand her my iPad, I said, "Oh, she can't use mine, but I can get her a notepad and pens." But apparently that wasn't good enough. She sighs and says, "Just let her draw a little bit. I'm almost done here anyway," which I knew for a fact wasn't true. They were waiting on bank approval for a loan, which can take anywhere between 5 to 30 minutes. And even then, they'll be here longer for finance paperwork, detailing, etc. I start to explain that this is part of my work, and she scoffs, saying I'm just doodling puppies, and it was selfish that I wouldn't let NG doodle on my device too. Poor NG was just looking at her hands, looking quite embarrassed. I then pretended my lunch was over and got up to spend the rest of my lunch at my desk. I couldn't see her behind a huge truck on display, but I can hear her grumble to NG about who knows what. Whatever. Pretend like I didn't hear so I don't mess up the sale for my coworker. Sometime later, Nature called me and I got up to use the restroom. I left my iPad on my seat so it'll stay plugged in and put a notepad over it to try to cover it up somehow. My desk is a wide crescent shape with no drawers to keep my things safe, so this was the best I could do to somewhat hide it. I was in the restroom no longer than 3 minutes, but when I got back, only my charger remained. My iPad and Apple Pencil were gone. I looked over to the lady, who had her large purse suspiciously in her lap now instead of on the floor beside her chair like it was before. I was panicked because a lot of my work is on that iPad that I needed. I went to my sales manager, SM, and told him the situation. He told me he would take care of it, but to be patient for now. I went back to my desk full of anxiety and my stomach doing backflips. SM went to the desk where EM was to work out the deal. They're far enough that I can hear their voices, but not pinpoint what they're saying. But I did hear her eventually yell, "How dare you! I would never steal! Do you want to lose this sale?" I immediately got up and went over behind the lady so SM could see me, but she couldn't. He tells her he understands, but my iPad went missing and he wants to make sure no one currently in the building has it. That's when I remembered the Find My feature on all Apple products. My iPad was connected to the dealer's Wi-Fi, so I pulled out my iPhone and pressed play sound for my iPad. Her purse started dinging. She tried to play it off as if it's her ringtone, and SM stared at her, as if daring her to answer it. Thing is, with the play sound feature, if I keep pressing it, it will keep pinging. I made my presence known and told her to give my iPad back. That's when she stopped playing dumb and just said, "Just let NG have it. Her birthday is coming up and I can't afford a present for her since I'm getting this car." SM said he was happy to cancel the deal so she can instead buy a birthday present for her child, and to return my iPad or he'll call the police. She practically threw my iPad at me, where it hit me in the gut, and took NG from the waiting area to leave. Poor thing looked at me with the most apologetic look on her face before leaving with her mother. SM might have helped me, but he's not exactly the nicest person. From now on, I'm not allowed to bring my iPad to the dealer. I have to either leave it in my car or leave it at home. Whatever. EM took my Apple Pencil with her since she left in a hurry, so I'm gonna stop by the Apple store after work to get a new one. But until then, I'm stuck with my pens and notepad. Update. Hi all. It has been a stressful and anticlimactic week. I came back to work on my day off on Monday to talk to the police. EM apparently doesn't live in the country. She came here to try to buy a car that isn't available in her area, so they had to reach out to the police department there to talk to her. They took my info and told me to fill out a police report online so they can get started, which I did. The next day, the shooting in Texas happened. Rest in peace, those little angels. So, the police assigned to my case deemed it not important enough and placed it on hold to do a 2-day shooting drill that commenced the following day, Wednesday and Thursday. I finally got word back yesterday, on Saturday, that the EM has been contacted and told to either give the pencil back or be charged with theft. I don't know what her reaction was, whether she went to the police or they went to her, or what kind of conversation they had, but I do know she handed over the pencil. 2 of her country cops just came into the dealer a few moments ago and gave me my pencil. They then told me that next time, if I can do it myself, then confront the EM myself, and I was capable of doing so because of the info we had of her. However, they did say that they can proceed with the charges for theft if I wish to do so, but say I should think about her child and that she returned the pencil anyway. Honestly, guys, I don't want to make this political, but at this point, I was exhausted and did not want to deal with the police or anyone in the legal system further. I just thanked the cops, offered them coffee, and sent them on their way. I really don't know if that was the proper procedure for police work or if we're all stressed because of what happened on Tuesday. I live in a dominantly Hispanic area, and the tragedy hit us all exceptionally hard. I don't even have the energy to be angry anymore. I'm just really tired and happy to have my pencil back. Now I have 2. I'll probably give my newer one to my little cousin, who wants to follow me in my art footsteps. She doesn't have an iPad, but her sister does, so maybe she can let her use it on it. I don't know. I wish I had a more juicy and righteous story about how EM was arrested and paid me money because of a stupid decision she made, but the tragedy humbled me to my core. All I have to say now is, take care of yourselves. I love you. The next story is titled, Burglar Calls the Cops Because the Homeowner Wasn't Doing Things Right. This story is actually narrated to me by a friend of mine and is a quick tale about how she turned the tables on a home invader. At the time this happened, my friend was raising her child by herself in a suburb of Texas. The area they lived in wasn't particularly safe with wild beasties of both human and animal kinds, so friend armed herself with a small pistol and took some gun safety classes to protect her small family. The years go by, child is now 5, and there was a series of break-ins in the neighborhood, so friend hired a security company to install security cameras around her home. One day, while reviewing footage, friend noticed a strange man lurking around the house. He seemed to wander around a bit and then wandered away, so friend shrugged and carried on with her day. Nothing to worry about, right? Turns out, she was wrong. A few days later, friend was working in her home office and saw the same guy walking down her driveway, opened the gate, and entered her backyard. Friend realized the kitchen door was open. Child was playing in the living room. Friend grabbed her gun from her purse and ran to the kitchen, and got there as the guy calmly walked through her back door. Guy sauntered in, looked around the room, to see friend standing there with her gun pointed at him. Guy froze. Friend: Who the duck are you, and why are you in my house? Guy gulped, grabbed his phone, and dialed 911. Help! I'm standing in this kitchen and some crazy idiot has a gun pointed at me. Friend was stunned, but didn't put her gun down while calmly telling child to go play in their room, then stood there, not moving while staring down the guy, who refused to leave. Guy: You're gonna get it when the cops show up, idiot. Friend: You are in my house. Get the duck out. Guy actually stayed standing there until the police came into the kitchen. Guy saw the cops and started screaming, Arrest her! She's crazy! Look, she has a gun on me! Friend put down her gun and started shaking. This is my house. You broke in. Cops stopped and stared, looked at the guy. You broke in? Guy: Well, her door was open and she pulled a gun on me. That's not how it works. Arrest her for having a gun. Friend: I have a license, and this is Texas, you idiot. Cops arrested the guy, who was still howling how friend didn't do it right. Apparently, she wasn't a proper victim, LMAO. Friend gave the cops a copy of the video of him sniffing around earlier in the week. She never heard anything back from them, so she figured he went to jail. The next story is titled, Entitled Business Owner Can't Use a School Computer and Loses His Only Chance to Get His Work Done. I was at the university before the semester started, working out some stuff for my classes. There was a line to see an advisor, and I'd been waiting in it for over an hour before I got to the front desk. While I was at the front desk, a man walked in and approached. He was told there was a line to see an advisor and to get in the back of it. At this point, dude looks at the man behind the desk and says, I don't need an advisor, I just need the password to use the library computers. He's told that he can sign in using his student email and password. Lo and behold, he's not a student. I'm a business owner, and I have accounts to handle and need a computer to do that. Blah, blah, blah. They tell him that, unfortunately, he's not a student and won't be able to access the school computers. He's super entitled, refuses to listen, and keeps insisting they just give him a random username and password so he can manage his accounts. At this point, I've been waiting open-mouthed for him to give up and go away since I've been waiting and it's my turn. He's still not listening, so I kindly decide to reiterate that non-students can't use the computers. I'm about to tell him that I have a laptop in my car and I'd be happy to let him use it. But he decides to fly off the handle at me, yelling that I'm a rude, inconsiderate bitch and that I need to learn to butt out and keep my nose in my own business. He's told again that it's not possible for him to use a computer and that harassing students will not be accepted. He doesn't stop, and security is called to escort him out. I finish with my advisor and start walking back out to my car, and this guy is still arguing with campus security. He sees me come out and starts harassing me again about how if I'd have kept my mouth shut, he could have used a computer. I couldn't help myself. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're not a student and can't use the school computers. I have a laptop in my car that I would say you could use, but since I'm such an inconsiderate biatch, I'm gonna drive away with my computer and you can suck on it. Bye-bye," with a happy smile and a sarcastic wave. It wasn't much, but the look on his face was priceless, and I left school laughing my ass off. The story is titled, Builders Who Have Yet to Learn the Definition of Irony. I popped into my local sandwich shop. There's a guy in a high-vis vest getting his order. As I reach the bread selection, he greets his friend, also in high-vis, who walks in the door. Very quickly, he jokes about having his Park Anywhere lights on. True enough, the big white van is parked directly outside of the shop on the road, and in the bus lane. The road is narrow, which is why there are many parking spots, and a car park, but this guy has still parked on the road in the way. They exchange some colorful language between them, complaining mostly about work as I make my order. I've ordered the kids' meal by this point, and the guy now behind me is agitated. He makes some comment about getting back to work. I ignore him. He gets a bit too close, leaning on the divider next to me. So I slow down, suddenly considering all my options. I act forgetful. I pull out the scrap of paper I had in my pocket. The guy behind me groans. Oh great, he's got a list. The woman behind the counter doesn't hear or doesn't care. I take my time, buy a few extra things, make sure to get them toasted. The woman obliviously plays along, gives me all my options to combine for a meal deal. Did I want an extra cookie? I consider them all, and get my order. The builder behind me is clearly agitated. I get my food and go. It feels like a bit of a win. I've wasted his time and gotten in his way. I doubt he realized why he lost his lunch break or that he was being selfish in what turned out to be a nearly empty street. But I felt better for it. The story is titled, Public Payback to a Customer Who Refused to Pay. So I had a garden maintenance business, and had a lady living in a very nice area call me and ask me to do some regular visits. I was actually in the process of selling the business, but made 6 visits. She was pretty bad at paying, but had paid a previous invoice, so I let her balance grow to about $300 before sending numerous reminders. When she found out I was selling the business, she obviously decided to try and not pay me. I was texting and emailing her every few days, and she would ignore 90% of my messages, and eventually ask me to stop harassing her, stating she had COVID and would settle it the following week. I'd basically written this off in my head, not caring about the money, but was angry because she's a high-profile lawyer, lives in a rich suburb, and had the means to pay me. I also mentioned the situation to my mom, who said that I shouldn't threaten a lawyer and should just walk away. Once the business had sold, I found her lawyer profile and where she worked. This is a big company in the city, and I noticed they had Google reviews open but had 0 reviews. I left a 1-star review very openly stating this was not the company but her and what had happened. By this point, I've moved to South America for 6 months of backpacking, and I didn't really care what would happen. I got a call from Jordan, the new owner of the business, the next day saying he'd received a call and was having legal action threatened against him and asking me to remove it. I told him the situation and I asked for 24 hours more to resolve it, and if it got too heated, I would take it down. He previously worked for me, and I consider him a friend, so thankfully he was all good with that. I quickly spoke to my brother who has a law degree, just to make sure she was just bluffing. At the end of the day, it's not illegal to make a Google review. I then received an email from her demanding I remove it, and she would pay me. I very strongly worded a response saying it will not be removed until money is clear in my account. I fell asleep then, and when I woke up, I had 3 more emails, initially threatening me, then eventually saying that she had paid the money. Once I checked the money was in my account, I removed the post. She had made it very clear that she was under extreme pressure from her firm. I'd also sent the email to their reception, and I'm sure the whole office was aware of this incident and her reputation had been affected. Moral of the story, if you have a public profile, don't treat people badly in the days of the internet. I also feel especially content that I faced up with a lawyer who probably thought she could scare me and not pay, and give them a taste of their own medicine. The next story is titled, Stole My Seed, eh? Now we're going to get real cozy. I, 43M, flew southwest recently and spaced on checking in early, so I ended up way in the back of the plane. It was only an hour flight, so I wasn't too distraught about it. I had a single large backpack as carry-on, so after making my way to the last few rows on a packed flight with a line boarding behind me, I spied an aisle seat and told the fellow at the window I'd be joining him, leaving the middle seat open for the moment. Again, it was to be a full flight, so every seat would be taken. I went to stow my bag in the overhead and discovered it was full, so I turned slightly to the left to reach up to the compartment in the next row behind me. Having stowed my bag, I turned back to take my seat, only to discover the guy who had been in line behind me, who absolutely saw me and heard me tell the guy already seated I would be sitting there, had decided to just help himself to my seat. I immediately chimed in with, "Hey, I was about to sit there," to which he replied with a shrug and a really condescending smirk, then offered, "Oh well, there's still a few seats behind you." I looked behind me and contemplated if this was a hill worth dying on. Turns out it was. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Nope, we're best friends now," and squeezed myself into the middle seat. I am 6'1", 230 pounds. He was at least that, as was the window seat guy. This just became a very cramped situation. As if the universe was already on my side, I discovered immediately that he was sitting on half my seatbelt. I very forcefully pulled it from under him, and followed it with the same shrug and smirk he had earlier, with a shy, "Sorry." Once we took off, I found it very hot in there, and needed to remove my zip-up hoodie. Of course, this required standing up and lots of arms flailing backwards to remove it. Smirk, "Sorry." Finally, refreshments made their way over. Being in the middle, I politely passed window seat guy his drink. Then, "Oh my god, so sorry," smirk. I clumsily mishandled mine and splashed the poor fellow. Snacks came shortly after. Who knew trail mix would travel like a confetti blaster if you opened the bag with too much force? Smirk, "So very sorry." The next story is titled, "Knew I was getting fired, so I scattered 200 business cards around the office in various inconspicuous places." I was working for a staffing agency as the branch sales manager a few years back. My new boss was and is a complete shothead. Had no idea what he was doing, had never worked in the industry, started pitting managers against each other to determine loyalty and support. We had a small office in the back of ours that he would use from time to time. One day, when I was in the office taking some lunch, I found that he was still logged into his email. Considering how much I disliked him, I snooped. I found out I was getting fired. Sucked, but I had a few irons in the fire already, so I was ready to move on. I immediately started hiding what was left of my business cards all over the office. In individual files, taped under keyboards, under desks, under chairs, taped to the back of the wall decor, between sheets of copy paper, all over the place. I still have a friend who works there, and after 4 years, they still find a random card somewhere in the office at times. It's a nice reminder of how they screwed me. My boss was fired about a year later for bad production. The branch is bleeding to this day. The next story is titled, "Smug Karen Takes My Car Keys Because I Can't Possibly Be the Owner. Earns herself a ride in the back seat of one of our country's finest." This is just a throwaway because I don't care to stick around for long, but this incident was so stupid that I can't really help but share this story since my friends keep telling me to. What I find most weird about this is that my car wasn't anything super special. It was just a yellow 09 V6 Chevy Camaro with black stripes. When I bought it, it was super cheap because the passenger side door had been smashed in somehow and there was already 130,000 miles on the odometer. But the title was still good somehow. No idea why, nor do I really care. It was sold to me via proxy. All I know is the car looked like a good deal, so I bought it. A friend of mine who works in auto body fixed it for me. He said that most of the damage was to the door itself, and I just needed a new door after he made a few tweaks to make sure everything was straight. Together, we managed to find a door at a salvage yard that was the same color. A little work, and the car looked almost new. And it became my fun ride to commute to work or drive around when I didn't feel like using my other car. I didn't do any modifications to it. I'm not one of those guys that's into speed or crazy mods. I liked the car because it looked cool, and the gas mileage wasn't so bad with the V6. In fact, I wanted a V6 Camaro because I heard that they're usually in better condition than ones with a V8, because people drive the V6 more for looks than power, and don't gas it as much. I drove that Camaro for a year before running into a random Karen at a supermarket last year in September. Those places tend to draw Karens in regularly, especially in the state I live in. I've seen many Karens, but was lucky to hardly ever be noticed by them. I was shopping for some stuff to make dinner, and was about to head home when I found the Karen with her young son all over my car after exiting the store. I'm guessing the boy was about 4 years old. And his mother was taking pictures of the kid sitting on my hood, while the kid kept smiling and gleefully saying, "Bumblebee!" Yes, I understand the reference, and I've heard it all before. I don't like people messing with my property, and told the kid to get off. The Karen took one look at me and told me to mind my own business. Now, I'm 29M, but I have a bit of a baby face, and my casual clothing made me look like a teenager, so I guess to her, I couldn't be someone who'd have anything to do with such a nice car. That's actually a pretty common car. I told the Karen to get off my Camaro, and she bluntly told me there was no way it was my car because I'm too young. I pulled out my keys and hit the alarm button on the remote. That made the alarm start blaring for a second, and her kid jumped off while screaming and crying because I'd frightened him. But rather than pay attention to her crying child, the Karen came running at me full speed and managed to shove me hard enough that I fell over. The next part is a bit hazy. I got a bump on the head, and that crazy idiot slurred every word she was screaming at me. She stepped on my arm and pulled the keys from my hand before I really had a chance to react, though she didn't really hurt me much. She was not a big woman, only around 5'2" or so, and a twig, while I'm 6 foot and over 170 pounds. When I got to my feet, she was comforting her crying kid and telling him that I was a mean person. I told her to return my keys, but she got hissy and said there was no way the Camaro was mine. I again stated it was, and I would only give her one more chance to return my keys. She didn't. Instead, she handed them to her kid, who proceeded to start playing with the buttons on the remote and unlocked the doors. I had enough and got my phone out to call the police. When the Karen saw I was on the phone, she started screaming and charging at me again. Though this time I easily dodged her, and she nearly fell on the asphalt and screamed I'd assaulted her. I never even touched her, and said as much out loud. The 911 operator was listening to everything that was going on, and I quickly told her where we were while this insane woman was still screaming at me, and 2 police cars had shown up before long. At this point, the Karen had locked herself in my car with her son and started the engine to run the AC. I explained everything to the police, and they knocked on the window of my Camaro to get the Karen to open it and give them her side of the story. She claimed the car to be hers, and that I was just some stupid, broke-ass teenager that tried to carjack her. Then bragged that she'd taken me down. The officer asked if that meant she'd shoved me over, to which she bluntly said yes. I told the police to look in my glove compartment. In there was my insurance card and a copy of my registration, and they could compare the name on my license. When the Karen heard that, she got out of the car and finally admitted it wasn't hers, but then said there was no way it could be mine, and that she just took the keys from me to find the real owner. That quickly earned her some shiny new bracelets, and she was put screaming into the back of a police car. The parking lot had cameras, so it was easy to prove the assault, though I only really got scratches, a bruise on my arm where she'd stepped on it, and a small bump on the head. After the Karen was taken back to the station, they found she was high on drugs. Which explains why she was so nuts. I, of course, pressed charges, though my testimony wasn't really needed since the police had both CCTV from the parking lot and the audio from my phone call. It turned out to be the Karen's 3rd offense, and she got 2 years in prison. Oh, and her kid was taken from her. The whole incident made me rethink owning the Camaro, because it had been a magnet for people that bothered me a lot, so I sold it. Basically got back everything I had into it anyway, so I broke even. I doubt I'll want to own another sports car again. The next story is titled, Your Dream House? I'm a city planner, and one of my jobs is code enforcement of unsafe properties. Today, a coworker gave me the dark history of one of our town's boarded-up homes, and I had to share this story. This man built his wife her dream house. She loved it intensely. Later, during their very ugly divorce, he fought like hell for the house and gave in on every other point of contention so he could keep the house. After he won it, he proceeded to not just let the vagrants and junkies move in, but actually invited them to live there. Thieves stole the wiring and appliances. Vandals broke the windows. He let the trashed property get condemned as unsafe and eventually got called into City Hall for an infraction, where he gleefully relayed the story to my coworker. The man was happily letting the bank repossess the destroyed house, getting cited for nuisances, and going bankrupt. all to get back at his ex-wife. The is titled, Robbery Turns into Exercise for the Robber. I know that there's a post on an Ask Reddit question that sounds very similar to this. I'm shocked that two members of humans could share this level of stupidity. Here's what happened. I was sitting in the parking lot of my local Walmart, waiting for a call from my friend on what he needed from the store. He's currently got some nasty food poisoning or something and has been projectile vomiting for a day or two. My window's down a bit because it's nice outside. Out of nowhere, a guy runs up to my car, knife in hand, and shoves it into the gap between the doorframe and the window. He's flailing it like a dying fish at my neck, and I freak out. I shriek like a little girl, almost piss my pants, and jab at the window button to close the window. He starts shrieking and drops the knife and tries to pull his arm out. He's not even gotten around to demanding my money. I fumble my phone and call the police. I'm pissed at this guy. Who wouldn't be? He's cursing and bashing my car and is threatening to murder me and my lineage, so I tell him to shut up. He doesn't, so I put it in drive and take my foot off the brake. He's caught off guard and starts saying, "What the duck are you doing?" I don't answer and tap the gas. Long story short, I took him around that parking lot for about 5 minutes before the police showed up. By the time they did, he'd lost a shoe and was totally out of breath. Yes, I'm a petty little craphead. No, I didn't get the knife, they took it for evidence. Yes, my window got messed up. And yes, someone I knew heard me shriek like a little pansy. I'm not living it down. I'm just hoping that the officer was right about him not having grounds to sue me for unlawful imprisonment or something like that. 1 out of 10, do not recommend.
The one starts like this. For years, solar energy was one of the things that I liked but was skeptical about. All those phone calls about getting solar panels on my house got me thinking, and I eventually caved in and had somebody come over and give me an estimate. With the amount of sun where I live, I would pretty much get all the power I could ever need. Costing less than what I was currently paying and also being clean energy made it an easy choice for me. This story is not meant to convince you to get any of them, I just wanted to include a little about how and why I got the panels installed onto my house. Now, the biggest complaint I hear from people about solar panels is that they ruin the look of the house they are put on. Now, personally, I don't care much for how my house looks or even how I usually look myself. Because of that, I cannot say one way or another about it, but to me, as long as they work, the way they make my house look does not bother me. What matters even less to me is how it makes other homes look. I would not let my house become a dump or my yard look like it has not ever been maintained, but other than that, I don't really care. If my house has chipped paint or could use a new window shutter, that is not something that bothers me. Who it does bother though is the president of the HOA, and this is not my first go around with the guy. He wants all the houses in the neighborhood to not only look good, but to match in a way. Only certain colors of doors and paint for the houses are allowed. Mailboxes have to be a certain way, and even the house numbers have rules that go with it. If anything is even slightly askew, you can be sure to get a knock at the door and this guy complaining and sending you a fine for it. This is why before I got my solar panels installed, I went through the HOA bylaws myself to double check that there wouldn't be any kind of problem. Nothing about solar panels was in the HOA bylaws at all, so I figured I was in the clear and got them. It did not take more than a couple of days for the HOA president to be ringing my doorbell. Me, hello? HOA president, hey there neighbor. I noticed those things you put on your roof and I'm gonna have to ask you to remove them. Me, I checked the bylaws before putting them up. There is nothing saying I cannot have solar panels. HOA president, take a minute to look around though. None of the other houses have them, so yours sticks out like a sore thumb. Solar panels are not referred to specifically, but I think we can agree they fall under property clutter, which is not allowed. Me, I am not removing them. The only thing we both know is your excuse for getting rid of them sucks. HOA president, you're not gonna make the entire block have bad property values because your roof looks so ugly now. I insist that you remove them. I refused again and closed the door in his face. If he wanted to come after me with a fine, I would take it to court and have a judge tell him that he cannot dictate my house and the fact that I wanted solar panels on my roof. He did not go with his usual course of action and instead took it upon himself to personally remove them. What he did was, he came to my house with a shotgun and started opening fire on my roof in the middle of the night. I heard the bangs and woke up terrified that I was under attack and possibly I was gonna die. I went to the window and peeked out to see him there shooting at my roof. I could not go outside due to the fear of being shot, so I could only wait it out until he left. In the morning, I looked over the damage and saw that the panels were basically destroyed. Huge chunks broken off and fell to my lawn, while others seemed to shatter into small pieces. One thing was for sure, and that was my house could not be powered with them anymore. I was outraged that he pulled a stunt like that just because I would not bend to his will. Making it even worse, the danger of a stray bullet potentially going through a window and hitting me. It did not take me longer than 5 minutes to decide that I was gonna sue this guy for everything he had. I sued the HOA technically and had to wait a long time until we could appear before a judge to talk about what happened. I had a lawyer and pictures getting taken the very same day I discovered the damages that this one man caused. I also had a camera on my property, but it only managed to catch the beginning of this assault on my roof. I guess he noticed it and shot it, thinking that the footage would be destroyed, but it backs up automatically to my phone. After a few months of waiting, we are finally set to go and see the judge. The HOA president goes first and claims that the solar panels were not allowed on my property due to HOA bylaws. Of course, he dismisses any knowledge or involvement of their destruction. Their main side is, as the HOA, they don't have to pay or get me justice because the damaged part of my home was not allowed to exist anyway. Then he made some fake apology how he was sorry, but the matter was out of his hands and I should take it up with somebody else. Even going as far as to say maybe the people installing them did a bad job and they just slid off my roof and broke. Hearing somebody lie and not getting to butt in is hard for me, and I was basically biting my tongue the entire fake story he told. Then it was my side's turn. I talked about waking up that night to the sound of gunfire and seeing him outside my window with a shotgun. I forgot to mention that I called the police the next day because I was in too much shock to think clearly at that moment. I was scared for my life. Either way, when the police came the next day, I pressed charges. Unfortunately though, where I am from, the police is incredibly useless. Anyway, in court I did show the evidence of the destroyed panels and how the damage doesn't make sense for things to just slide off my roof and end up with bullet holes and shell casings. Then I showed the partial video, which you can tell the HOA president did not expect to exist anymore, and his face clear as day in it. This was the main thing that caused the case to go in my favor instead of his. Finally, the HOA bylaws themselves were read over and a judge agreed that nothing in there would make having solar panels a problem. So then, the HOA was forced to pay to replace my solar panels, which was gonna cost them a pretty penny. As for the president himself, they were gonna look into his gun ownership and charge him for firing illegally and destroying my property. Even if you own a gun, that doesn't mean that you can shoot wherever you want and whenever you want. The arrest was more than enough for him to lose his position as HOA president, and the weird rules he was making could finally stop. Homeowners in the neighborhood could have a little freedom of creativity back when it came to their homes. I did get my solar panels back on the house, and the entire case drew attention from people. One side effect of the entire thing was people asking me how I like my panels and if I recommend them. I'm a huge fan of irony, and more people became interested in potentially getting solar panels, which was the best irony in my opinion. And the next one is titled, Idiots Trespassed and Got What They Deserved. And by the way, dear viewers, if someone ever trespassed on your property, please let us know in the comments what you did with these people. How did you get rid of them? Let us know in the comments. I own some rural, undeveloped acreage that we plan to build on someday, and in the meantime we would camp or drive out and spend the day target shooting. The property is well posted with no trespassing and no hunting signs. The main access is gated with an 8-foot metal gate. There are berms, ditches, jersey barriers and locks at any point along the 10-mile stretch of road along where anyone would even consider accessing the property. The neighboring properties have all done the same, so basically there is no easy access on a 30-mile length. Even with all that, people still cut the locks, move the barriers and fill in the ditches to access the property on their quads and dirt bikes. Last weekend, a couple friends and I decided to go out there and do some short-range target shooting, maybe 25 yards. We are maybe 2 miles in the woods and suddenly a guy and his 8 to 10-year-old son come up behind us on dirt bikes and the dude goes off, yelling at us about shooting and endangering his young child. Remember, we are shooting short-range targets we have set up against a hillside, so no errant bullets whizzing around, and it is my property after all that is posted. I try to explain that he is actually trespassing when he says, "Dude, shut up and let the man handle this." My male friend says it is her property, you need to talk to her, so once again I try to explain to him that he is trespassing, and he tells me to F off and says he is calling the sheriff because we are shooting and we need to stop what we are doing and follow him out to the road to meet the sheriff because the property is gated. No kidding, douchebag, I gated it. I said we would not leave but go ahead and call, so he walked away and called. While he did that, I also called and told the sheriff's department the gate was unlocked and they could drive in, or if they wanted to, call me when they get close. They said it would be about an hour and they would come to the site. Now, we had probably a dozen rounds already loaded and 3 handguns, so we figured, what the hell, told the dad we were gonna target shoot, and of course he flipped his and called the sheriff again. We fired them and then made sure all the guns were on the table open so the sheriff could see they were empty, and sat there talking amongst ourselves while A-hole stood with his son. The sheriff shows up and the guy explains how he and his son ride there all the time, describes how he cut some logs and used a small Kubota to make an entrance so they could get in. Then shows what direction he came from when he rode up and discovered those dangerous shooters. The officer just let him talk and writes it all down, then he comes over to us and I show him my ID and my phone where I have pulled up the tax records to show that I'm the property owner, and this fine gentleman does not have my permission to be on the property. The officer goes back over to the man to get some more information for this report, asks if those are the dirt bikes they were riding. The guy proudly says yes. Then the officer asks where the helmets are. The guy says he doesn't need them on private property. The officer then asks if the bike's registrations are current. Again, guy says they don't need to be on private property. So the officer asks who owns the property, and that's when the guy realizes things are not gonna go his way. So far, his a-hole tax has cost him a ticket for no helmet and a double amount ticket for the kid not wearing one, and 2 tickets for unregistered bikes, 2 trespassing charges, a vandalism charge for the work he bragged about to access the property, and he had to push both bikes the 2 miles out to the road and then walk another 3 miles to his truck. Plus, of course, whatever the cost is to repair the damage he did making the access and damages for the trail system he created. If he had not been an a-hole, I would have just told him he could not ride there and then blocked his access. As for our supposedly illegal shooting, the sheriff complimented me on my grouping, which was nice. And the next one is titled, "Dumb Customer Gets What He Deserves." So I work at a famous chicken chain that is known for our politeness. And dear viewers, if you are from the US and you know which kind of chain OP is talking about, then please let us know in the comments. Anyway, the story starts like this. So at my store we offer free meals to police officers in uniform who eat in the restaurant. My coworker greeted this customer and asked for his order. He promptly showed what an a-hole he was by berating her for having to wait in line for all of 2 minutes. He did it so loudly that 3 officers eating lunch heard him. He used very foul language and took 4 minutes to do so before placing his order. Strike 1 for him. He next showed what a douchebag he was by camping out in a booth and making a mess that I only expect from large families with multiple small children. This included throwing his trash on the floor in plain view of the officers. Strike 2. He then went to his car and started throwing what seemed like an ocean of old fast food wrappers and cigarette butts out of his car into the parking lot. That was strike 3 for him, as this was littering. All 3 officers went out and made him clean up his mess and wrote him a ticket. Where I live, littering carries a $500 fine, and if he contested it, the judge could tack on up to 60 hours of community service. So finally, this guy ended up paying $508 for his lunch. And the next one is titled, "Was this really your spot?" I work from home full-time and rarely drive unless I am grocery shopping or out for an appointment. In my complex there are non-reserved spots and reserved spots in the underground garage, all of which are not assigned. As long as you have a reserved sticker on your vehicle, any of the reserved spots, which are all labeled reserved, are fair game. I have a non-reserved sticker because it is $40 cheaper than the reserved pass. So anyway, I was coming back from an appointment and turned into my neighbor's reserved spot so that I could back my car into the open non-reserved spot behind me. Lo and behold, male Karen in his rusty 2007 RAV4 starts honking at me for being in his spot, telling me that I cannot park there because I don't have a reserved sticker. I told him I was only backing out. I probably should have let it go, but his Karen-ness pissed me off so much. As I was getting on the elevator, I quickly realized he only wanted to park there because it was right next to the elevator. A light bulb went off in my head and I made my way to the rental office, it's in the same building, and asked to upgrade my parking pass. It is an extra $40 I'll be shelling out, but it's worth the petty revenge. I am waiting for him to leave for work tomorrow, so I can move my car into his spot and leave it there for God knows how long. There are perks to being fully remote. The next one is titled Getting Revenge with Shifts. During my last few high school years and early university years, I worked part-time in a supermarket at the checkout department. Of course, you would see your fair share of Karens and Richards and Kevins and entitled parents, entitled kids, etc. But no one in that store was more infuriating to deal with than the most recently hired supervisor. She was the kind of supervisor that would deny POT if you did not give 4 weeks notice, despite all of our contracts stating that we only needed to give 2 weeks notice. But then when you tried to give 4 weeks notice, she would say, "It was too long ago, I don't remember you asking me." At the time of this story, I had worked at this store for quite a few years, and every Christmas season I would say the same things to the supervisor. "I don't have any plans, I'm not leaving town, so if you need me for extra shifts, just put me down whenever you need me, just as long as I finished by 9:30 p.m. They knew that I would not care if it was any day of the week, just a 4-hour shift or 11-hour shift. I was completely free with no plans, totally flexible and able to work mostly whenever. My only condition was that I had to be done by 9:30 p.m. This was because I had not yet gotten my full driver's license and it was illegal for me to drive by myself without some kind of supervisor between the hours of 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. The store was open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., so out of those 14 hours I could not work 0.5 hours of them. It was a good system between and led to me doing a lot of extra shifts, with a lot of them being last minute. However, early November, the new supervisor asked me about my December and January availability, and I said the same old song. "You can put me down for extra shifts as much as you like, whenever, for any day, as long as I am done by 9:30 p.m. She asked, "Why 9:30 p.m.? And then I explained to her about my driver's license. She just nodded and walked away. Then mid-November rolls around and the December schedule was released. I was given plenty of extra shifts as per usual, but you might have seen this one coming. I was scheduled for 6 days a week, which would have been all good with me, except for the fact that 5 of them ended at 10 p.m. I found the supervisor as soon as I saw the schedule and reiterated that I cannot work past 9:30 p.m. The conversation was something like this: "Supervisor, but you can still work until 10 p.m. Me, I cannot, or else I will be driving illegally and I'm not gonna do that. Supervisor, yes, but there are plenty other ways you can get yourself home. Me, like what? SV, have your family pick you up. No, they are in and out of town on business. SV, you can take the bus. Me, no, it arrives every hour, 10 to the hour. I'm not working until 10 and then waiting outside in the dark alone until 10:50 p.m. I was 19 female at the time. Supervisor, what about Uber? Me, I'm not working all day just to spend it all on an Uber to get home. Well then, you will need to find someone to fill in those shifts for you. Nope, according to my contract I don't. And then she just walks away. I am left there speechless. Later that same shift, when she was the only supervisor around, she completely left me out to dry with a horrid customer who could not use the self-service checkouts to save his life and took it all out on me. We have all seen horrible people like that, but this guy in particular was so bad. Co-workers, even those from different departments, kept coming up to me asking if I was okay after dealing with that guy. Not my supervisor though. After I got home that day, I was done. I sent out CV after CV on job websites. My mentality was, if I'm gonna get paid minimum wage, I might as well do it somewhere better. Within a few days, I had a retail store asking me to come in for an interview. Within the next week, I had that new job lined up and ready to go. So I went back to the supermarket on my next shift and handed my 2 weeks notice. All my other supervisors were gutted that I was leaving. I'm not saying I'm some star employee, but I was always keen on extra shifts, barely took sick leave, was so chill, and willing to do a lot of the side tasks that no one else wants to do. For example, collect the shopping carts in the rain or empty the rubbish bins, and I just knew a lot of stuff about the checkout in general. Also, I was gutted I would not be working with them anymore, but working with that one bad supervisor hurt more than working without others. The day I handed in my notice, the bad supervisor was not working. I did not see her until a few days later, when she stopped me near the back of the store around a few other coworkers. I'm guessing that she was not too happy that she lost a de facto full-timer just before the Christmas rush. She seemed a bit flustered but still had that fake smile of hers. Supervisor: so I heard you're leaving soon. Me cheerfully: yep, in just under 2 weeks. Supervisor: but you've worked here for quite some time. Any particular reason why you're leaving so quickly? Me, with the biggest grin I've ever had on my face: I already told you why. I'm not working those 10 p.m. shifts. It was beautiful. Within a split second of me saying that, her smile dropped and she just stared at me speechless. This time it was my turn to just walk away. You don't quit bad jobs, you quit bad management. A Reddit comment I saw a few years ago. And yeah, dear viewers, if you have ever quit a job just because of bad management, then please let us know in the comments, because I would love to hear about your story.
The story is titled, Order Me to Clean Up Your Mess? I'll get your boss to see how badly you treat your staff. One day, I was working on the till, and doing just fine. It was a good day, as Snappy wasn't around, so I only had one asshat to deal with that shift. It was a slow day, and I had been using Snappy's till credentials to let her see the true reflection of a normal swipe rate. See previous revenge. And when I didn't have any customers waiting to be served, I made sure all the bits around the till were organized, clean, and looking good. The only big job around the till to keep clean and tidy was the medicine cabinet. It's a locked cabinet just below the till with medicines we advertised, but customers couldn't just pick up off the shelves as they were quite pricey, and we needed to advise them on the dosage, etc. But I took 30 minutes or so to clean the damn thing, making sure all the flea treatments were on one side, the calming remedies were on the other, and so on. There wasn't really enough space for everything, but I made it work so when anyone looked in the cabinet, they would be able to see every single label or front of a box to determine where anything is. I was a little proud of my work. Next thing I know, Messy came into the till area, on the phone with a customer I assumed, and went into the medicine cabinet. Now, Messy was not a lean guy. He was big, with huge arms, probably through lack of a proper diet and too many takeaways. And this cabinet was small, so I had a feeling I knew what he was going to do to find the product the customer was obviously asking for, and got my pet pad out. Oh yeah, all of us worker bees had iPads called pet pads, which we would use for taking online orders, writing notes, checking off to-dos, etc. But there was also a camera function, which I decided to utilize that day. I got my pet pad out and set it to record video. Messy proceeded to put his left arm as far as he could on the inside of the cabinet and swipe to the right, and then forwarded to bring out every damn product in there. He hadn't even tried looking first like a normal person would. He just went full 1-year-old on the beautifully organized cabinet I just finished cleaning. I'd got it all on camera, and when he got off the call, having told the customer we don't have whatever they wanted in stock at the moment, he got up and told me to clean up the cabinet. I left the pet pad on record, although I didn't point the camera at him, I just needed the audio for this part, and told him I had finished cleaning the cabinet not 5 minutes before he came and swept everything out before even attempting to search inside. He said he didn't care, and ordered me to clean it, even pointing at the mess all over the till floor area. I then stopped recording on the pet pad, smiled, and said thank you, and to hold the tills down for a sec as I walked off towards the back of the store. I went into the office where Doormat was sitting, doing something on the computer. I showed him the video and told him I wanted to make a formal complaint about Messy, and I wanted that video to be included. Doormat did let the other managers run amok and walk all over him, but that recording must have taken the cake for him. He wrote up the complaint, downloaded the video, even let me take a copy for myself because I didn't trust it wouldn't get deleted, and filed it to head office. I got the rest of the shift on the tills in peace, as Doormat hauled Messy's ass inside, and from what I'd heard from other worker bees, he took him down a couple pegs. After seeing my complaint at head office, the big bad boss man above the managers, mentioned in the previous revenge, for that store visited us in person and chewed out Messy in front of the entire staff for 20 minutes, lectured the managers on how we treated each other as a staff family, and how conduct like that, proceeds to show the whole staff of the video I recorded, will not be tolerated. I have never been so vindicated in my life. I got many pats on the back from the worker bees after that meeting, and let me tell you, Messy and Snappy always watched where my hands were going every time they pulled their daily BS around me to make sure I wasn't reaching for my pet pad. The next story is titled, Entitled Mom Tells Her Friends She Owns My House and Lets Random Kids Swim in the Pool. For a little backstory, I live in a nice house. It's right on the beach, and I take good care of it and my garden, so it's not strange to see people admiring my home. I'm also a teenager and basically live alone. My dad and mom both work in other states and travel a lot, and my sister lives with her fiance. I can drive, do laundry, and can go grocery shopping, so this isn't too weird. I don't like driving, so I usually bike everywhere, and I have a pool in the backyard. On to the story. EM, entitled Mother, EK, entitled Kinder Egg, CF1, CF2, EM, Confused Friends, CT, Confused Twins. Okay, so I just had a long day at work and had a few groceries with me on my bike. I just want to take a nice hot shower, and I look like death in my fast food uniform. As I pull onto my street, I see a line of people blocking my driveway. Like, full blocking. I pull onto the sidewalk and start walking my bike towards the group. And I overhear CF1 talking about how happy she is for EM and how beautiful her new home is. I'm like, what? No house nearby was sold or is even on the market. So I try to pass to get to my garage. Me. Hey, can I get past, please? EM. Just go around. Can't you see we're busy? Me. I just need to drop my bike in the garage and then I'll be out of your way. I'm glad you like the house though. I try to take care of it. CF1. I think you might be confused. EM lives here. Me. No, this is my house. I live here. I don't know her. EM. You are obviously trying to break into my house. Get away before I call the police. Me. No, you need to leave. EM. I will not get off my property. At this point, I just push past and head towards the garage. That's when I hear the splashing. No one should be in the pool. I drop my bike and run to the backyard and see 3 kids swimming in my pool. Duck that, I raise my voice and tell them to get the F out. The CT both get out, but are obviously confused, but the EK stays in. EK. My mommy says I can swim. Go away, you idiot. Me. No, I am not responsible for you drowning. Get the hell out of my pool and off of my property. EM. Don't talk to my angel that way. It's his pool. CF1. EM, what's going on? Who is this girl? EM. She is trying to rob me. Get the F out, kid. Me. I'm panicking at this point. Well, prove it. Prove that you live here, huh? CF2. EM, why don't we go inside? The kids shouldn't be here for this argument. Me. Like hell you're going into my home. EM. Yes, we're going inside. Now go away, girl, before I call the police. Me. Fine. I dare you to get in. The group climbs the stairs. Obviously, EM didn't think this through. Only 2 keys to this house exist. My key and my sister's. I lock up my bike, grab my groceries, and push past EM. She is making excuses to her friends about why the key doesn't work. Me. Excuse me, if you don't mind, I'm going into my house. CF2. EM, what's going on? I close the door and lock it as EM is banging on my door, screaming about how she is going to call the cops. I called the cops, not her. She ran off as soon as she saw the cop cars, and the friends stayed behind, very confused. They explained that EM had told them that this was her house and that they were just going to swim in the pool and then head to the beach so they would never go in the house. Later on, no charges are pressed on EM. I hope she learned her lesson. The next story is titled, Want to Throw Staff Under the Bus? Watch it fall back onto your family. I worked 5 years as a warehouse manager in a building that the head office was right above us. I worked with a CSR, let's call him J, and his father worked in the warehouse, let's call him L. We had a team of 30 people in the warehouse, and we had just had our online business active for about 1 year now. Before that, our main source of business was picking transfers for stores and just stocking the stores. We finally opened the online part of our business, this is back in 2015, so we would also sell similar products on the web. The problem is that if a store got all the product picked of one thing while a web order came in for the same, then we would be at a loss because we don't have enough for the customer. It would already be scanned by an employee and packed on a skid. Not worth digging an hour to find a $10 product. Anyhow, J and L were both infamous for throwing people under the bus for their own personal gain. It almost seemed that they would do it whether it was personal gain or not. They were just lowlives, the people I would consider losers. They both worked in the business for 10 plus years, and they were both entry-level positions since they were toxic and non-promotable. One time, I get into a meeting upstairs organized by my boss, CFO, the customer service manager, and the 3 CSRs. It turned out to be kind of an ambush because Jay walked in with a stack of paperwork. I was new at the time, about 4 months into the job. We talked about the online business and where we did well, but ultimately where we fell short. Jay then dropped the stack of paper pointed at me and said, "This is a stack of issues that your staff have done in the past year." Literally a list of things even from before I was employed. He basically said that the warehouse didn't know what they were doing, as the stack included mispicks, incorrect quantity shipped, and other issues. I had said this is the first time I've heard of any issues. Why would we not bring the issues up one by one so we can fix the concern or see where the issue lies and address it to correct future ones, rather than wait for them all to pile up and become more issues? I said this, and then said, "So wait, you were intentionally holding off on information that could have helped this business so you can collect enough data to try to make someone lose their job instead?" Jay said, "Someone should be fired for this." CFO quickly disagreed, but I said, "You know what? I will have to look at these issues and address with staff." So I took the stack and went downstairs. I found something interesting. No issues were brought up about specific errors from the department L works at, his dad. So I went and asked the CFO if Jay could provide me details on each department, specifically Department 35 and 40, which were our laboratory and LTL shipment business. Both are L's position. Eventually, Jay took a week, so I had the CFO ask again. He gave me a few issues, but tried to sugarcoat it. The thing is, Jay had given me a few small issues with a customer we don't deal with anymore. Apparently, this customer dropped us as we had tons of logistical issues. So I called the customer and said I was a new manager trying to find ways to improve and wanted to know what happened. When the customer happily gave me a list of issues, I found it was all L that created the errors. In fact, we lost 3 high-valued customers due to it. So I went to the CFO and got approved to terminate with a bare minimum package. Jay and L lived together. L was the person paying for the mortgage. When Jay found out I was terminating his dad, he came to me and talked to me personally about it. He said, "Listen, my intent wasn't to get anyone terminated. It is simply to make sure we function well as a company." I said, "Jay, I appreciate your concern, but you made it very clear in the meeting that someone needs to lose their position, and I found several issues where an employee had clearly made us lose 3 high-value customers, and he is still creating issues to this day." Jay said, "Okay, but termination is a stretch." I said, "I don't know how you found out I was going to possibly terminate someone in the first place, but I do what I must to simply make sure we function well as a company." I played dumb that I didn't know they were related, to the point where after I had terminated L and officially was told they were son and father, I had gone to Jay and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know you two were related. If I had known, then I would see why you were hiding information on the department intentionally." Over my time there, Jay had tried to do the same thing, and I eventually got him to a final written warning based on staff harassment. He still works there as a CSR. Will never move up in the company. Has his age capped. I don't enjoy terminating individuals, especially when it's a parent who needs to provide for their family. But this duo, duck them. The story is titled, "Coworker Tried to Steal, Almost Got Away with It Till She Pissed Me Off." I work at a veterinary clinic, and as you may assume, it gets very busy. I typically have the role as a veterinary nurse, but help my coworkers when I can. I was helping clients at our front desk because it was slammed and there was only one receptionist. A coworker stormed up front, got real rude with me, and said she needed help in the treatment area. Cool. I will absolutely help, but I wanted to finish my task, and I certainly don't appreciate the attitude about helping someone else. So I snapped back and we idioted at each other for a minute. Fast forward to the evening, this same coworker who had no right to be a dick earlier had also used flea medications for her cat that was in today. She didn't put it on her invoice and specifically said anything that costs money she didn't want to get today. So she planned on just not paying for it. I didn't honestly care too much because it's inexpensive and the cat needed the meds, so I ignored it. Well, because she decided to be an a-hole, I asked our receptionist if that medication got put on the invoice, knowing the answer was going to be no. Amazingly enough, it wasn't on there when they looked. So, of course, the doctor puts it on the invoice and they try to charge the card on file. It paid for a whole 4 cents, and we were all there watching her card decline on the computer screen. The receptionist calls coworker and she says she doesn't have the money to pay for it. If she doesn't pay it, it will now go into collections. If my office manager catches wind she had no intentions of paying for it, she very well could get written up or fired. My manager and I are having a meeting on Monday, and it just may come out that she had no intentions of paying for it. The same person stealing from the company is supposed to be a shift lead and then interim manager when my manager goes on maternity leave. This, friends, is why you don't treat your coworkers like crap. I am thrilled at the petty slip-up of her attempting to steal from the workplace.
The story is titled, Boss Didn't Want to Approve a Short Leave. So instead, I availed a long one. I work with a large organization having multiple branches in every state across the country. I am the head of one such branch. My boss, the regional manager, controls around 15 such branches in a region cluster. During August this year, I had asked my boss for a 5-day leave for September, which he had promptly granted. I then informed HR about it, suggesting him to temporarily arrange for somebody to run my branch for the week. This was required because, 1, due to some corporate directives, some of the branches, including mine, could not run without a branch head being physically present in the office. 2, enabling someone from inside the branch to substitute for me wasn't possible due to technicalities. HR assured me there was plenty of time to arrange for my temporary substitute, so I didn't think much about it, since anyway, it was his job to take care of it in cases of leaves. My dumb ass didn't imagine it would be so crucial to get the leave approved formally in writing, because before this, nobody ever faced something like what I was about to experience. Come the last working day before I go on my leave, I ask our HR about who would take care of my branch in my absence. He flatly stated that there was no one available in the region cluster who he could deputize to my branch in my stead, as many employees in our region are on leave because of festivities this week. Me, you are telling me this now? Anyway, I fail to understand how this is my problem, given that my leave was already granted a month ago. HR, have a discussion with the RM, my boss. I call him up. Apparently the HR had already had a talk with him regarding this matter before I even called him. RM, how could you intend to go on a leave during this time when we are already under so much pressure due to this sudden staff shortage? On top of that, our company's audit is due next month. Me, but you already had approved my leave 1 month ago. RM, no, I'm sure I must have said that I would think about it. Me, absolutely not. I wouldn't have booked my tickets and planned my travel to my hometown to see my parents if you hadn't confirmed the leave. This went to and fro for a while, and I was exasperated from this argument. By the end, I felt really humiliated that I had to almost beg for a leave. Me, fine, I won't go. At that point, I arguably felt my dignity was more important than a few days off work. RM, huh? Okay. He was at a loss of words at my sudden giving up, so my leave stood canceled. My tickets had to be canceled, money wasted, and I was left utterly exhausted at this bull crap. A few days later, we got a notification for the yearly Interstate Staff Soccer Tournament being arranged by corporate. If selected, I'd be playing for my state, and the tournament, from the selections till the final, would go on for a month. Soccer happens to be one of my favorite sports, so guess who just applied and got selected in the state team? Now here's the funny thing about sports and activities that are arranged by our company's corporate center. The top management takes these seasonal events very seriously. If you're a participating employee, nothing or nobody on this planet could make you rather go back to sit on your chair and mind your job instead of participating. So as it appeared, although not on a leave per se, but I was all set to go on a month-long tour across the country, playing soccer without having to worry about managing a branch and getting paid in the process. Even irrespective of my leave fiasco, this was a damn good thing to get involved in. As some of you may have expressed a curiosity, yes, extravagant events like these are not unheard of in big Fortune 500 companies. My organization is a large conglomerate and the third largest employer in our country. Still, it always beats my logic that they can spare some 150 to 200 employees for a month for fun, yet there are some regions that are plagued with staff scarcity. My boss's office was eventually informed about my participation in the event and was advised to excuse the participant from his duties till the tournament was over. The day before leaving, I drove down to the RM's office to formally inform him from my end about me competing in the event and my ensuing month-long absence that is to be expected. He looked expressionless and then just feebly asked me, "Why did you really participate?" Me. "Well, you see, had I happened to be at my hometown on a short leave this week, I wouldn't have been able to participate in the tournament at all, or even try for the selections. Sad, I couldn't go on that leave." The defeated look on his face was priceless. The next story is titled HOA Karen Pretends to be a Cop, Confiscates My Sports Car, and Gets It Towed. The story begins with me moving to a new place. I'm not really the social type of person, so I really didn't look up into the owners of the HOA or my neighbors. That's why I didn't know that this Karen woman was not actually a cop. This is a detail that would matter later in the story. So let's begin. Firstly, I can't say that I have many things that I'm proud of that I own. I'm as materialistic as I am a people lover, which means zero. But the one thing I cherish most of all my possessions is my car. I own a Porsche Cayman GTS, which makes me the happiest in the whole world. It was my dream car even since I was a small kid, and having it was like fulfilling the purpose of my life. The rest of my house makes it seem like I don't have money, when in reality I just don't find joy in buying a bunch of expensive things that work just as well as their cheaper counterparts. The HOA around here is strict, and the fines get handed out for a lot of stuff that shouldn't even matter. I once got a fine for leaving my trash cans out the entire day, which I only did because I wasn't home until that night. They weren't blocking anything, they were just on the grass on my property edge. Of course, they needed somebody to enforce and hand out fines to people, and that's where Karen came in. She was always the one to hand out fines and tell everything to the HOA, and so I thought she was a cop, helping around, keeping everything safe and sound. Even as an officer, we all thought she was a major Karen with the way she acted and always seemed to show up at the worst times. If you thought you could go against the law, even for just a minute, she would somehow just know and show up to give out fines. Everybody hated it, but nobody was going to argue with an officer and risk getting in trouble with the law. An HOA fine is one thing, but nobody wants to get an actual ticket from the police or get arrested. One day, though, she was on my property, and I noticed she was staring at my car. I didn't know what to make of it until I went over, and before I could even say hello, she started talking to me. "Karen, I'm going to have to confiscate this car." Me, why? Did I do something wrong? Karen, we believe this car doesn't have proper papers to be in this country. You can hand over the keys to me, or I can get a tow truck here and have it dragged to impound. I was confused by what she was saying, but I didn't want to cause any trouble. I was dumb and gave her the keys, being certain that the whole situation would be sorted out. I was also given an HOA fine for the car. That didn't make any sense. She didn't exactly explain or justify the reason of the fine, which made me angry and suspicious. And so I attended the HOA meeting. That's when I found out that Karen wasn't a cop, but just the HOA president. She disguised herself as a cop so she could give fines for everything she didn't like. I was furious and called her out in front of everybody at the meeting. She told me that I couldn't just use slander to get out of my fines, and was kicked out for disturbing the peace of the meeting. Since my neighbors also hated Karen, I let them know that I had found out who she really was, and that she was just faking to be a cop to intimidate us and get what she wanted. This also meant that my car had no legal issues. She just wanted to take it from me. We made a plan that my neighbor was going to intentionally break HOA rules to get her over to his house and fine him. I was going to film it from my yard because if she saw me, she would know that I already knew she wasn't official. Anyway, the bait worked, and my neighbor asked her things like if she was part of the local police department, and she said yes. Him, I guess you know Kevin then, right? He is a cop there. Karen, of course, we're best friends. My neighbor was lying. He didn't know anyone called Kevin at that police station. We caught her red-handed, and the only thing left to do was now call the police on her for what she had done. Even putting aside that she had basically stolen my car, it is a crime here, like in most countries, to impersonate a police officer. We showed them what she was doing, and they easily confirmed that Karen in no way was a police officer. When I told them what she did with my car, they said that since it was over a certain value, she was going to get charged even worse. They came to arrest her, and she was still roaming around the neighborhood in her fake uniform and trying to get into everybody else's business. When the police got a hold of her, she started yelling that she is allowed to have a uniform because she is the head of the HOA, and her job is to protect the people. The thing is that if she had a uniform or badge that said HOA, she might have gotten away with that. Instead, she clearly had the police department she didn't work for all over the uniform and badge. She had no shame in admitting that she literally stole my car, also shaming me for how my house and I look. Karen, he doesn't deserve that car. I do, for all the work I put in this place. Policeman, lady, where is his car? Karen, I got it towed yesterday. I wanted to teach him and everyone here a lesson. I don't want people to look to our neighborhood and see a man like him driving a car like that. He should have stayed in his league. Fortunately, the police managed to get my car back. The car was in perfect condition, just as she left. The cops even admired it and congratulated me for having and taking care of such a beautiful car. Sad and happy at the same time, she wouldn't have to pay me anything for the damages. But I would rather it just not have been damaged in the first place. She was going to get in a ton of trouble anyway for the couple of crimes she was caught committing. For confiscating my car, she was charged with grand theft auto. The main charges against Karen were that of impersonating a police officer. At least in South Africa, we like to take those types of things very seriously to avoid more people doing it. She wasn't even given the option to plead guilty and get parole. Instead, she was going to jail, no matter what happened. She was sentenced to about a decade in prison, which felt like justice. That's why I'm telling you, keep your eyes open for crooks like this one. The last story is titled, Accuse Me of Sexual Assault? Have fun getting kicked out of 2 universities. I had a friend in college I met at the end of my freshman year. I'll call her Jane for the sake of this story. We were both 19 at the time. We started talking over the summer between freshman and sophomore year and became quick friends. I had pulled her into my friend group, and she became one of my small group of outcasts I had at college. Overall, things were not great, but I thought we could work on it. We both had toxic behaviors from neglectful homes to work through. Also of note is that I had a girlfriend that I had known since high school and had been together with since college had started. This is relevant because Jane had developed a pretty massive crush on me. I knew about it, but ignored it, figuring it would go away if I just didn't lean into anything. She was my friend, and I didn't want anything more. I loved my GF. Jane suffered from a neurological disorder I still don't understand, but it basically caused her to have seizures when she was stressed. The grand mal kind, where she would drop to the ground and convulse for several minutes. She couldn't always tell when these would happen, so I thought an emotional support animal might do her some good, because she loved dogs. We went to an animal shelter to see if she clicked with any, and found a dog that we'll call Max. I put all of Max's adoption information under my name because I was already in their system, and we went home with a beautiful, well-behaved dog. She was the perfect fit, big enough to support Jane to the floor and provide deep pressure therapy as needed, but small enough for a dorm room, which he had to be because Jane had been kicked out of her house when her parents found out she was a lesbian. I figure we could get Jane settled into her dorm and start paperwork for Max's ESA clearance for school. Max had started picking up on warning signs and alerting before Jane would seize, and it all seemed to be going well. Only, Jane started lying about where we got the dog, and her qualifications, small stuff at first, and then rapidly getting bigger and bigger, stuff that she shouldn't be lying about. At one point, she had claimed epilepsy, saying she got Max from an organization that provided service dogs for underprivileged and disabled adults, both of which were false. Max wasn't a service dog. Besides, she was an ESA, which is a massive difference. I confronted her about it, told her to stop, and she promised me she would, but she didn't. It got to the point where I found out she had never been kicked out of her house. Her parents knew she was gay and didn't care. She chose to leave and lied to us and the university for emergency housing. She had joined a service fraternity, and I found out she had been lying to everyone there, too. I couldn't take it anymore, and decided to distance myself from her at the start of my junior year of college. Somehow, the university found out that she was being shady, and rather than face consequences, Jane left and started at a nearby university. I didn't think anything of it, and stopped talking to her completely. 2 months later, I get a call from a friend Jane had made at her new school, basically saying she was sorry to believe everything Jane said. Jane is a pathological liar, and that I need to be careful because Jane was spreading some pretty serious accusations about me. It took a little pressure, but I found out Jane was saying that my GF and I had been in a relationship with her, but kicked her out after SAing her because she was too clingy. That's apparently when this friend realized Jane was full of crap, because I'm pretty vocal about being asexual and sex repulsed. Not to mention, I'm literally not that type. I was naturally pissed that Jane was trying to do such horrible things, so I called the head of her fraternity and told them everything I knew about Jane, and everything she had lied about, including Max's qualifications and her need for housing. Apparently they knew she was lying, but didn't have any evidence to bring it up to the university until then. The university I went to told the university Jane was attending, and she was subsequently barred from both schools, with no promise of transferable credits on terms of fraud. I called her after the ruling and told her to keep my name out of her mouth, or getting kicked out of school would be the least of her worries. Haven't heard from her since. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you would like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.